Have you ever had a night you wish you could just erase from your mind? A night so terrifying, so real it lingers like a shadow. This is about the night I learned some darkness is best left undisturbed. It was the summer of '92. Me and two buddies, Mark and Steve, decided to spend a week at my uncle's cabin. Nestled deep in the Maine woods, it was the perfect getaway from the city's stifling heat. Days were filled with fishing, laughter, and the comforting crackle of bonfires. Nights, however, were different. The woods would come alive, a symphony of rustling leaves and eerie animal cries. One particular night, the air grew colder, a damp chill that seeped into our bones. The usual night sounds were replaced by an unsettling silence, broken only by the howling wind. I remember feeling uneasy, a knot of dread twisting in my gut. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on the spooky stories we'd shared earlier. After dinner, we decided to turn in early. The silence in the cabin was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. My heart pounded in my chest, each thump a stark reminder of the growing unease I couldn't ignore. Sleep, usually a welcome escape, felt impossible that night. Hours seemed to crawl by, each one stretching into an eternity. Just when I thought I might be drifting off, a sound cut through the silence. It was faint, barely audible, but definitely there. A soft scratching, like claws on wood. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart racing. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Mark mumbled something in his sleep, turning over. Steve, however, was wide awake, his eyes wide with fear. "Yeah, I heard it," he whispered back, his voice barely a breath. The scratching came again, louder this time. It seemed to be coming from the back door. We exchanged nervous glances, our minds racing with possibilities. "What do you think it is?" Mark's voice was a low murmur in the darkness. I shook my head, my throat too dry to speak. I had no idea, but a primal fear was starting to grip me. We listened intently, our breath catching in our throats. The scratching stopped as abruptly as it had started. A heavy silence descended upon the cabin, thicker and more oppressive than before. It was the kind of silence that felt almost alive, pregnant with unseen danger. I felt a chill crawl down my spine, raising goosebumps on my arms. My eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the sound, for anything out of place. The shadows seemed to dance in the faint moonlight filtering through the window, taking on menacing shapes. "I don't like this," Steve whispered, his voice tight with fear. "I don't like this one bit." I had to agree with him. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. An overwhelming feeling of dread washed over me, a feeling of being watched, hunted. It was as if something was out there, in the darkness, its unseen eyes fixed on us, its presence a suffocating weight on our chests. We stayed huddled in our beds, whispering in hushed tones for what felt like hours. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window sent our hearts racing. The air grew thick with fear, making it hard to breathe. We tried to rationalize the situation, to convince ourselves that it was just an animal, a raccoon perhaps, trying to get in. But deep down, a primal instinct screamed at us, warning us of an unseen danger lurking just beyond our perception. "Maybe we should check it out," Mark suggested, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Just to be sure." The idea filled me with a sense of dread. Part of me wanted to know what was out there, but a larger part, the part ruled by fear, screamed at me to stay put. We argued in whispers, our voices tight with fear, each of us torn between curiosity and terror. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, we decided to investigate.
Arming ourselves with whatever we could find, a rusty old axe, a heavy maglite flashlight, we crept towards the back door. The floorboards groaned under our weight, each step a deafening echo in the silent cabin. The air grew colder as we approached the door, sending shivers down my spine. Mark reached for the doorknob, his hand shaking. I held my breath, my eyes glued to the door, anticipating something. I wasn't sure what, but I knew in my gut it wouldn't be good. He flung the door open, bathing the backyard in a blinding beam of light. The sudden intrusion of light into the darkness revealed nothing but the familiar trees, swaying ominously in the wind. Relief washed over me, momentarily chasing away the fear. "See, I told you it was nothing," Mark started, turning back to us with a nervous laugh. But his words died in his throat. Steve was gone. One minute he was standing beside us, the next, he had vanished without a trace. "Steve! Steve! Where are you?" Our voices echoed in the stillness of the night, unanswered. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind, threatening to consume me. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the night. We searched frantically, our flashlights cutting through the darkness, our calls growing more desperate with each passing second. The woods stood silent, unyielding, as if guarding a dark secret. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but our search yielded nothing. Steve was gone, vanished. The reality of the situation crashed over me, cold and terrifying. Fear, raw and primal, coiled in the pit of my stomach. We were alone, lost in the heart of the woods with something unknown and terrifying. And it had taken Steve. Exhausted and terrified, we stumbled back into the cabin, locking the door behind us. We huddled together for warmth and comfort, our eyes darting around the room, expecting something, anything, to emerge from the shadows. The silence was deafening, broken only by our ragged breathing. Suddenly, a light flickered in the distance, beyond the trees. It pulsed, a rhythmic glow that seemed to beckon us closer. Was it Steve? Had he managed to find his way back? Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in the darkness of our fear. We had to see, had to know. Grasping at this sliver of hope, we cautiously made our way back into the night, our hearts pounding in unison with the pulsing light.
The woods were silent, except for the crunch of leaves under our feet. The air was thick with a strange metallic scent that made my stomach churn. The light grew stronger as we approached, casting long dancing shadows that twisted and writhed like living things. Finally, we broke through the tree line, and the source of the light came into view. It was a small clearing, bathed in an eerie green glow emanating from what appeared to be a large metallic object half buried in the ground. And then we saw him, Steve. He was standing near the object, his back to us, his body illuminated by the pulsating light. "Steve! Thank God!" Mark cried out, rushing towards him. But as we got closer, a wave of nausea washed over me. Steve wasn't right. His skin was an unnatural shade of grey. His eyes glowed with the same eerie green light as the object, and his mouth was stretched into a grotesque, silent scream. Terror, raw and consuming, gripped me. This wasn't Steve. Whatever that thing was, it had taken him, twisted him into something monstrous. The light from the object pulsed again, brighter this time, and Steve turned. His eyes, no, not eyes, black pits devoid of humanity, locking onto mine. Mark, oblivious to the danger, reached out to touch Steve's shoulder. "Steve, what happened? Are you okay?" But before he could make contact, the light from the object intensified, bathing the clearing in a blinding white light. We shielded our eyes, screaming in terror as the light engulfed us. The ground vibrated beneath our feet, and a high-pitched whine pierced the air, drilling into my skull. I felt myself being pulled towards the light, a force stronger than anything I had ever encountered. Then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. The light was gone. And so was Steve, the object, and everything else. We were left standing in the middle of the clearing, the only evidence of what had transpired, a faint metallic smell lingering in the air.
We stumbled back to the cabin, our minds reeling, our bodies trembling with fear and exhaustion. We didn't speak, couldn't speak. the horror of what we had witnessed etched into our very souls. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, the darkness outside pressing in, threatening to swallow us whole. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window sent our hearts racing, our minds conjuring images of Steve's vacant eyes and that unearthly light. Sleep was impossible. We huddled together, too terrified to move, too traumatized to speak. The hours stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock a hammer blow to our sanity. Dawn, when it finally came, brought little comfort. The sun, usually a symbol of hope, felt alien, its light unable to penetrate the darkness that had seeped into our hearts. We packed our things and fled the cabin, never looking back. We left behind a piece of ourselves that night, a piece of our innocence, our belief in the safety and predictability of the world. We never spoke of what we saw that night, not to each other, not to anyone. The memory of it, however, remains, a chilling reminder that there are things in this world, things beyond our understanding, lurking just beyond the veil of reality, waiting for the opportune moment to break through. Some things are best left buried in the darkness. Some doors once opened can never be closed. And some nights, like that night, are destined to haunt you, to linger in the shadows of your mind, a chilling reminder of the night you stared into the abyss.